want to forget to do that. Here we go, children. Anything of particular importance? Again, there's those two. Well, I don't care so much about the counterexample one or the number 13 data one. But other things in there should be relatively important. Relatively important. Jenna Durst. I was hoping somebody would ask about it. 19. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there's two ways to approach number 19. You can do the old simple method that we did back in 5th grade. Does anybody remember? In 5th grade, when we had missing letters, I told you time and time and time again to do what? Anybody remember? Really? All that time I've wasted on you?
Yeah.
You can solve it by equation way, or you could just solve it by thinking of an easier subtraction problem and what you would do. For example, let's do, if you have, sorry about that, 7 minus 5 equals 2. I'm pretty sure you guys are probably able to do that. If you've got that problem, and look, see how I'm missing the middle here? This was the 5th grade way. If I didn't know this was a 5, what do I do with those two?
Subtraction.
And which one did I subtract from which one? We took the 2 from the 7, so I would have to take the 5/6 and subtract the 2/9 from it. In which case your common denominator is 18, and this is 15/18, and this is 4/18. And you'd end up with 11/18. Was that the answer? That was the 5th grade way, which works perfectly well. When you got into 7th grade, or not, in 7th grade, we would do this equation-wise, which would just be this: 5/6 minus y equals 2/9. Okay. To get rid of this, what do? You subtract it to the other side. If you subtract 5/6 over here, you get the same kind of deal. Here's probably where you went wrong. You get 4/18, and from that you're subtracting 15/18. Now please note the negative sign. If you have a negative 15 and a positive 4, you get a negative 11/18. To which you say, but we got a positive 11/18. Why did that happen? Because what do you have over here?
Negative
y. You need to change this to a positive, which means that is positive. Wow, that was forced. Appreciate it though. By the way, if you need help on that quiz, you could talk to Jason, because he was the only person in here that got none wrong on it.
Wow. Wait, really?
How do you know? Why do you sound? Why does that? What did you say?
I'm roasting my boy Jason.
He was roasting you earlier.
Roast.
Let's not roast anybody. Jason, what do you got?
How do you do number 17?
Number 17. Number 17. Yeah, we seem to have trouble with these as well. I guess I don't blame you. What would be the first thing you should do there, Brooklyn Peterson?
I'm writing it down. I pass.
Really? You have no idea? It's order of operations, really.
Okay, you do the parentheses first.
Right, and we can't really take 2 from minus z, but we want to get rid of the parentheses. So, Riley?
Gotta distribute the negative.
Yeah, you gotta get rid of the parentheses by taking this negative and distributing it, or think of it as a negative 1, it don't matter. 3z, negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2, negative times a negative z is a positive z, minus 5 equals 9. Step 1. Step 2, Riley, since you're on some sort of a roll.
Do that to combine like terms.
Right. You want to simplify both sides before you do shuffling from one side of the equal sign to the other. You want to do what you can. Put together what you can over here. Obviously over here there's nothing to put together. But here you have a 3z and a 1z. Oh, look at Mrs. Stowe. She'll have 1z's pretty soon. 3z plus z is 4z. And a negative 2 and a negative 5 is negative 7. Once you're finished with that, then it's solving any old equation like we always do. I'm gonna get the numbers over there, so you add 7, you get 16. If 4z equals 16, then z equals 4. By the way, I'm a firm believer that one of the reasons people quit using, you cannot buy these math books anymore. I'm a firm believer that you can't because people struggled with them so much. See, it's the American way that when you struggle with something so much, you just quit and find something easier so then you succeed. But my thoughts are, I would love for you to struggle with this so that next year when you get to other math, it's like, wow, this is a lot easier compared to the stuff that we did. That is.
What if we struggle
that
with
is
this
really
and we
my
don't
firm
understand the
belief.
stuff next year?
Well,
Then we're just
Maggie is
constantly
doing.
drowning.
Maggie is also doing honors in advanced geometry, which is supposed to be hard. It's intentionally hard, and it's geometry. It's a different math. Some people hate algebra and love geometry. Some people love geometry.
I hate algebra.
Some
It's
people
so
hate
funny.
all math altogether. Josh, what was your question? You had it. Josh says El Número Uno. But that is my thought on it. A little like, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. And I don't know if you'll remember this from last year. Find the greatest common factor. There are a couple different ways to do this, and I don't remember when we did this. Who got the answer right?
You said it out loud.
You said it out loud.
You did say it. Oh, during this class?
Yeah.
Isabel, if you were doing this, did you prime factorize it or did you just look at it?
Nope.
Okay, because there's a couple different ways to think about this. Basically, what they're asking you is what is the largest numbers and letters that will come out of both of those? In other words, if you have a 6 and a 9, what is the biggest, not the biggest number that they go into, but the biggest number that you can divide them by? If I have a 6 and a 9, what can I divide 6 and 9 by? 3. A 3. So there's my number greatest common factor. Then you look at the same with the letters. You have an x squared and an x. What is the most amount or biggest number of x's you can take out of both of them? Okay, you can only take one x out. You can take 2 x's here, but you can't take 2 x's there, and it has to be a common factor. This one has y to the third, that one has y squared. What's the most you can take out? Y squared. This one has a z squared, but this has no z's. You can't take a z out of something that doesn't have one, so you can't take the z out. This is your greatest common factor. If those, well, another way to do it, just to show you, back in the day, if I don't remember if we did this, we probably did this in 7th grade. If that doesn't make sense to you, another way to do it, if you break it all the way down to the simplest things, is prime factorize both of them. If you have 6x squared y cubed, what does that break down into? Well, 2 times 3 times x times x times y times y times y, right? 6x squared y cubed. What does 9xy squared z squared break down to? 3 times x times y times y times z times z times z. The prime the greatest common factor is what do they both have in common? They both only have 1 3. So you take a 3. They both, or you could take the group that has the fewest of any factor. Well, no, but they have to be a common factor. Forget that. All right, this one has only 1x. This one has 2 y's. They have nothing else in common. 3 has 1. Forging ahead, Maddie Roth.
Number 4.
I was hoping somebody would ask about number 4. Even though I have no idea what it is. Which one of these is 4?
One that says number 4.
Not translate the sentence below into an inequality. there's really not a lot of math to talk about here, except to know that product means multiply. What are you multiplying? A number and 3. Now you might do this, n times 3, but usually in math we put the numbers first. It doesn't matter because order doesn't matter. That's 3n. Is greater than, there's the greater than sign, and there is the 5. That kind of makes sense, Maddie. There's not a lot of math. I mean, there's no calculating there. It's just writing stuff down. Let's do that. Uh-oh, Elijah?
18.
Number 18. Alright, my goal is to get my letter by myself here, so what did you do? Give me a. Does it bother you that the letter's on the right side, not the left side? Is that right? I just said it like that, that's probably right. So, well, what did, tell me what you do here first. I did. We did +1 or add 1, like we like to say in 8th grade. 4 equals negative 6a. And to get a by itself, you now just divide by negative 6. Okay, divide by negative 6. I get a by itself, divide by negative 6. So your answer is this, it just needs to be reduced, negative 2/3. What did you, pray tell, get for an answer?
Somehow I got the 4 on E. I got negative 6 for it.
Huh. Yeah. By the way, with equal signs, it doesn't matter, children. You can, if you want to write the problem down and put this side on the left side, it does not matter. It's all the same. You can't do that with inequalities, though. Only with equal signs, which obviously we're learning on that one quiz that we have trouble with inequalities. Riley,
Number 7.
number 7. Number 7.
Number on the other side.
It is on the other side. And unfortunately, it's really cold out, so I hope that truck, I hope Josie brought it. Did anybody actually bring winter?
Yeah.
But the people that have the winter stuff, maybe can be outside.
I have my Carhartt, we're all good.
Can I wear my D while we do
Jules,
that?
since she has the Carhartt, will be the foreman of the whole group. Does it actually have a, is it really the Carhartt?
It's
Because I have a knockoff Carhartt.
No, disgusting.
That's-
Knockoff.
Well,
Good for
geez,
you.
not all of us can be farmers.
I'm just
or
saying.
real stuff.
Hey, it was on sale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I love
Yeah,
the
me
thing.
too.
I
I'm
made
a
her up.
farmer.
Me
I wear my
too.
rules and stuff. I wear my jeans when I hire that.
Yeah, Brooke would slap me with a writing crop in the room.
I didn't realize it was gonna be the
Not
hard
you
one.
with the what?
What are the writing crops? Like,
Can you turn on? May I borrow the lane for a minute?
You absolutely can borrow Delaney. Alright, back to this one here. Who asked you this one, Riley? The only thing, notice the lack of equal signs here, which means you're not going to get a equal answer. You're just combining what you can like terms is. In order for them to be like terms, the letters and exponents have to be the same. In other words, you are looking for any other term that has an a squared b cubed. It could be written like this, because it doesn't matter, but it has to have an a squared and a b cubed. This one doesn't have an a squared and a b cubed. This one doesn't have an a squared and a b cubed, but this one, by golly, does have an a squared and a b cubed. So you can put Mr. 3 and Mr. minus 2 together. Please know that when you add or subtract these things, the letters and their exponents don't change. Okay, when I add an x to an x, I don't get x squared, I just have 2 x's. So here, I am adding 3, I have 3 a squared b cubes. I'm just breaking this down into its basic form here. And from that, I'm subtracting 2 of them. I probably should have wrote it the other way. But. So if you have 3 and you take 2 away here, that means these go with that and that go with that. You're left with just 1 a squared b cubed. That's what this all simplifies to. Here, these are both AB squareds, and again, you have 3 of them and you're taking 2 of them away, so you're left with just 1 of them again. A B squared. Who asked about this? Where did we go wrong? How many people got that right?
I took out stuff like for the parentheses.
Well, you factored it out?
Yeah.
First of all, did you see the word factor there?
No, it said simplify, so
So you ended up with A B squared times A plus 1? They probably would have given that to you if you actually factored that out.
AB squared in parentheses, no, AB squared and then in parentheses A plus 1.
Yeah, I would give you that if you factored it out, but it didn't tell you to factor. And factoring things don't make them simplify. You factor them to try to simplify them, but in the end, you really would actually multiply it out because we're not a big fan of parentheses always. Riley?
8.
Number 8. Oh, yes, this one here, children. This is where you can, how many people got 8 right? Okay, here, if you just look at it, you can make yourself, simplify this for yourself very easily here by just, since this is a fraction, if you make them all fractions, 37 over 1 times 9x over 1 times 1 over 37. I see a touch bit of cross canceling I can do there, which would be what, right? This goes away, leaving you with nothing but a 9x times 1 on top and a 1 times 1 on the bottom, which is just 9x. Jenna?
Number 15.
Number 15. Number 15. Am I going down or moving up? To the east side, 15. Oh, yes, I'm glad you asked about this one. 5 over 7. Again, multiple ways to do this. If it were me, I would do what? Anybody know what 2 words? A hyphenated word? Cross products, not cross cancel. Which simply means this times this has to equal this times this. That's what equal fractions are. The one thing you must be careful of is what, Luke Franklin?
I wasn't paying attention.
At least you're not being honest.
That is very true. The one thing you have to be careful with is this. When you multiply 7 times this, it is that in parentheses. That is looked at as one whole thing. So when you write this out, it ends up looking like this. 7 times k minus 2 equals 5 times 14. So and when you solve this, you're going to have to do the distributive property here. 7k minus 14 equals 5 times that. Did I do something wrong? There's a lot of talking there. 7k minus 14 equals 70. Add 14 to both sides, you get 84. And if 7k equals 84, you end up with a 12. That is not the only way to do that.
But it's the easier way.
No, it's not. There's an easier way.
Well, you know.
I like that way
Actually,
better.
This way.
If you
Easier
think
for
about
me.
it, there is.
Don't
Seven
confuse us.
doesn't
You gave us a
afford
good.
it.
Yeah, so don't go on.
So 7 times
Stop.
7
Stop.
times 2 is 10, so
Yeah.
Moving on, though.
No, you're gonna confuse me.
Yeah, that was.
No, you're gonna confuse me.
Just don't listen to him if they don't.
Do it.
Other ones.
Oh.
Brianna, number 3. 1, a 2, a 3. This is where you went wrong on this one if you did. Because certainly your first thought on this is, since it's already on a graph, to make a triangle
Yeah.
like such.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, children, that look at the scale here. This isn't 1, 2, this is 2, 4. So every one of these is actually worth 2. So this triangle, if you're looking from this distance from here, because slope is rise, actually I should put down, slope is rise over run. So how high is this triangle? It is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Over how wide is it? 2, 4, 6. Does it end up being 2?
I
Yeah.
counted it regularly.
Yeah, that's what I
did
did.
6 over 3 was fine.
It probably would.
I did.
It is ratio. It is a ratio, I guess.
I got 6 over 20.
Where did you go wrong?
That's what I did.
Couldn't you?
I did this.
Now, what I would tell you to do to make sure you got it right, you could use. They give you the 2 points, and you could just use the slope formula, which is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x2 minus x1. Plug those points in there and get it. But I guess counting the triangle.
Oh no. It's
You want me to do it formula wise?
Yes, please.
Which one did you make the 2s and which one did you make the 1s? So this is the 1s, and this is the 2s. So y sub 2 is right there, correct? First of all, I put parentheses here. Minus y sub 1, which was negative 8. 4 minus the negative 8 is actually 4 plus 8, which is 12.
Yeah.
On the bottom, x sub 2 is 2, minus a negative 2, which is actually 2 plus 2, and you get 4 on the bottom. Wait, is that?
No, that 2 is wrong. It's supposed to be -4.
Oh, there you go, kids.
What?
That is,
I am.
if you got it wrong because you used the slope formula, they have it wrong on the test because this point here is not negative 2,
Oh my-
8. This is negative
Oh my goodness. Who exposed that?
Oh my
How did nobody else notice that?
I don't know.
That's why people quit buying this book.
You can trust it wrong.
So,
I didn't write.
if you actually have 3,
I'm just counting.
by all means, count it right. How many people have 3?
Oh wait, no, I didn't get that.
I did it right. Maddie.
What?
More questions, please. Lady, come on.
On the test, there's things like 14.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what is 14?
Provide a counterexample one.
Nah, I'm not gonna worry about 14.
Okay.
So it
that's
I
so it
promise
won't count.
won't even make you do 14.
Can it be edit?
What about 13?
Did you still go
That's the one that's like,
What?
what's misleading?
Yeah, what about 13? You don't care about that.
Wait, how can it be out of 20 if I don't give you 20? I graded my J. FYI,
Do it out
on
of
your
18.
test, rarely do I actually use actual percentages because if you did, most of you tank.
What?
Usually, I use probably the pretty simple formula of this. 0 is an A plus, 1 wrong is an A, 2 wrong is an A minus, 3 is a B plus, 4. So technically, every test you really take, it's really out of 25. Usually I follow that sort of thing. I think that's the way it works. Just because. It is hard math for you, and I think you should be rewarded for taking something hard.
So, yeah.
Elijah Fisher?
16.
Is that down or up? The up was 15 was up.
Up. There you go. Right there.
Here, another one. Elijah, what did you do? Tell me what you did, then I will tell you what I would do.
I subtract for 5,
But why?
because I was a big.
So if on number 16, if you'd write in your notes, think,
I'll do it.
maybe that would help you here. Remember, your ultimate goal is just to get numbers on one side, letters on the other. So this number's already by itself. To move it over here really does you no good because then you got to move other things away from it. You want to move this letter, that term, over to here. So you subtract 2 ends. And if you have minus 3 ends and you put 2 more minus or another 2 minus ends with it, you end up with a minus 5 equals 5. And then just like always, last thing you do, divide by what's in front of the end. And equals -2. Does that clear up the mucky waters of any disillusionment there? This one should not have been too tough. Keith, does this pertain to math?
Yeah.
Sure. 20. At a bakery, bagels are $2 and muffins are $3. Let X be the number of bagels sold, let Y be the numbers of muffins sold. The equation 2X plus 3Y equals 150 shows that the bakery made $150 selling bagels and muffins for these interceptions. And explain what that means. Well, here's the deal, children. Let's just break this apart piecemeal by piecemeal. The first thing you should have done in order to try to figure this out is write down what the letters mean. X means the number of bagels. And Y means the number of muffins. They gave you the equation of 2 because every bagel costs $2, so 2 times whatever the bagels are, plus 3 times however many muffins you sold, because they're $3 each, and they made $150. Okay. Now, if you think about that, because we are graphing this, this is a linear equation because there are infinite amount of answers to this. Well, technically there's not because you can't have negative, you can't sell negative muffins, so you can't really go on the negatives, and you can't make negative dollars. But for all intents and purposes, when you graph this, okay, X is the bagel line. It says the x-axis is the number of bagels. And the y-axis is the number of muffins. Okay. So when you found that y-intercept, well, if you put 0 in for x, you get 3y equals 150. What does y equal? What is your y-intercept? Where is it across the y-axis? At 50, right? What does that mean? That means if you sold no muffins, you must have sold 50 bagels. No, I'm sorry, if you sold no bagels, you must have sold 50 muffins because you made $150. Is that what it looked like? Was that the answer I read? Same thing conversely, if you found 0 for y, x equaled 75, that means if you sold no muffins, you must have sold 75 bagels, because that's the only way to get $150. And then that line in between would be any combination that would also give you that. I don't know what it would be, but anyway, so just grab that. No, that said, and explain what does the y-intercept mean. All you have to do is, they're going to tell you the same thing. You just say, well, if I sell 0 of this, I get whatever your intercept is that. If I sold 0 of that, it's whatever your intercept is there. That would be the notes I write to myself. And it should be. That's a nice graph. And again, you can't sell negative number of muffins, so really, the graph should have ended both here and here. We really should go any farther than that, because can't sell negative things, or you could. Riley,
Number 10.
I love number 10.
Ooh, big multiplies. I like it.
Where is number 10 on the first page or second?
Second.
Way at the top.
Yeah.
Right there. Not multiplication.
Concert tickets sell for 12 and a half, Friday night $3.75 or so. 20% of the money earned from ticket sales is donated to charity. How much money is donated to charity? Wow. Now, so the gist, and this is where Grace was getting all crazy on us here.
I like it.
Think about this. You have to kind of understand this. One ticket, one measly lousy ticket was 12 and a half bucks. You sold 375 of them, which is going to give you your total amount of cash, right? And then they said 20% of that, 20% of that, which is what fraction? 1/5 of that goes to charity. Now, what you must understand, you could save yourself a touch bit of time in understanding you are basically, you can just take 1/5 of every ticket and multiply that by 375 and get the same answer rather than doing all that humongous multiplication. You know, or 20% of it, or 0.2 times that. If you take, for each ticket, if you take 20%, let's do it like this. $12.50 times 20%, right? 0.20 or 1/5. You could either divide this by 5 or multiply by 0.2. Oh, look it. You get 25. Is that right? $2.50. You get $2.50 of every ticket goes to charity. So you can just multiply that by 375. Is there a quick way to multiply 2.5 times 375? Sure. Double 375, Grace, what is it?
I wouldn't ask. Yeah, that would.
Half of 375 is?
Why are you looking at me?
370. Wait, what?
One.
Well, I'm taking 0.5 of it now. I already doubled it. Now I just have to do 50 cents times it. So what's half of 375?
Oh,
375.
180.
Five.
750.
50.
Wait.
Did I get this right?
I don't want to learn.
That seems harder.
Yeah.
But I like doing all the big numbers.
Or take 375 times 2.5. That was like, here's the case in point, Willy Wonka. When he was talking, or when the professor was up there and saying, let's talk about this recent, whatever, let's talk percentages today. He says, let's say there were 1,000 Wonka bars or whatever, and you ate 10% of them or whatever it was. How did he do 15%? He didn't multiply by 15. He just said 15% is 10% plus half of what 10% is, because that's 5%. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Maybe
If
I- Sorry about that. See, at some point you gotta think outside of the proverbial relax.
Always in our box.
Maddie Roth.
All the time.
What? Number 5.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a really good idea.
I think we should skip this one too.
No, this one, they actually made life very easy for you because there's no negative exponents. Since you'll remember when I said there was negative exponents, I said move everything to the numerator, then multiply and then fix it all. This one, since there's no negative exponents, all you have to do is do the distributive property. You multiply m squared, this times this, m squared times m squared is m to the 4th. N times n squared is n cubed. And then you also have to multiply this whole fraction times this. which is 2n³ times m squared, just gets tacked on there because you can't put them together, and then n times x is nx. You can't do any more with that because in order to add fractions, you have to have common denominators. We haven't got to that point. At some point we will, but right now this is all that you can do. And then they asked you, apparently they didn't ask you, the book gave what n can be, but that's all you're going to do for tomorrow. Multiply the tops together, multiply the bottoms together, distributive property. Shouldn't be too terribly difficult. Plus sign. If there are no more questions, Lainey.
Is there any negative on press?
No.
Take it.
You want me to look? I said that without looking, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they will not. What the test number was 5, 9. Problem, which one?
9.
5. No negatives.
Hi.
Almost. Now, however, write this down for your notes. I am telling you this.
Okay, what number?
For number 5.
Okay.
For number 5. Oh, we didn't do it on this one. I'm sorry. I do need to do this. Look, this particular fraction here can be simplified because it does have an n on top and n on bottom. So this n should cross off if one of the 3 ends up there, and there should be n squared. Somebody should have corrected me on that.
I was gonna.
I was scared.
Don't
be scared.
I just thought you were back to college again. That will happen on tomorrow too. It'll also be on the second fraction, and it might be with A's and B's, but that make sure you know to simplify that one.
I like M and N.
Well, M and N look like the same letter.
M&Ms. Make sure you write that on your notes for tomorrow. Problem number 9. I'm looking at number 9. Nobody asked about number 9? Wait, are you asking about number 9?
And 11.
Is that because we have a, even though you got them right?
Well, yeah, but like, your answers are confusing.
My answers were confusing.
I mean, not 11.
Wow.
9, 12.
Write this down for number 9. First of all, 2 things. Rate of change is the same thing as slope. And this little box is nothing more than a glorified x and y table turned on its side. This would be the x values, and this would be the y values. So, this point right here is 2, 6, and this point right here is 4, 12. So, you could just use the slope formula. Or, children, this is what I would do. You are just really looking. Slope is the same thing as finding the common, what do we call that? What is that called? No. When you talk about what times this gives you this.
3.
I know what it is. Common factor, I think we call it.
Yeah.
As long as this is the same for all of them, that is your slope. Your slope will end up being 3 if you do all
This
this.
is like 3 and something.
What?
You said 3 miles per hour.
Oh, it is.
That's what it is.
Times 3 miles per hour gives you how far you went. It's your speed. What is the rate of change? Speed is slope is rate of change. So note to self, problem number 9, just look for the common factor between these two. And I think you'll find it very simple. I can do no more than to give you those very simple, easy clues. Slope is a great thing, by the way. Rate of change. And number 11, I believe.
12, you meant 12.
No, you meant 11.
That's what I did, 12.
Yeah, but he told us how to be 12 yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Problem number 11, please write this down.
Except for Josh.
We did this in 7th grade. I talked about it every day in 7th grade. Just make yourself a ratio table Actually, with this, since it's got 3 sides, you can put 3, but you don't need them. Okay, this is the small, and this is the big. And then you just need to write their corresponding sides. For example, this side is the shortest side. The short side on this one is x. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's make this right. The short side on the small one is 2. The short side on the big one is x. I don't know what we call this side, the medium side?
The long.
It's not the long, because the hypotenuse has to be
No,
bigger.
the hypotenuse is just the hypotenuse. The long is just the long.
The medium on the small is 4, and the medium on the big is 5. You will note that this doesn't work out nicely because you make equal fractions. 2 over 4 equals what number over 5? It's not an easy sort of thing to do. You could reduce this if you want. It's 1/2. But that is where cross multiplying comes in again. 2 times x equals 5. So x is going to equal 5 divided by 2, which is, you could probably just leave it as 5 halves, 2.5, 5 halves, 2.5, whatever one you want. Well, just because I'm right there, note to self, when will the denominator be 0? Commandment number 1 on the 10 Commandments is you cannot have a 0 on the bottom of your fraction, and that's what you're asking here. When will a plus 5 be equal to 0? When a is -5. Because a -5 plus 5 is 0, and that makes things just a little bit 3 plus 2. It doesn't matter on the top.
Anything you divide by 0.
Okay,
Only undefined.
okay.
Shoot.
Could you like re-simplify what you're trying to do on number 10? Like you're
Wait, you mean
add-
re-simplify?
Yeah, re.
Oh, Rihanna.
Wait, is 10 here?
No.
Wait, before you came
I will try number 10 again.
Okay.
If you want the shortened condensed form, Jaden, probably the best thing to do on this one is this. Is this. I would just, if you did not catch what I just said, Jaden, step number 1, find the total money you made. Find total money you made, which would be 375 times 12.5, which is going to give you some grandiose big number. That's your total amount made. And then you have to, step 2, find 20% of that, because that's what you gave to charity. There are 2 ways to find 20% of something. You could either multiply it by 0.2 or multiply it by 1/5. Either way, you will get the same answer. I'm not going to do the math, but what I tried to tell you before is rather than working with these ginormous numbers, you could find 1/5 of how much each ticket was and then multiply that by 375, because that's what you're really doing is this. You're taking 375 times 12.5 times 20%. And it doesn't matter order when you multiply. You could take 20% of this and multiply by that and get the same answer. You could take the fraction 1/5 times that and get the same answer. That is as simplified as I can do. I'm not going to do that math. Josh! Did I do 6 already?
Yeah.
Nope. Is it on this page or up here? Oh, 6.
Yeah, tell us a little lighter.
Josh, this is the issue here. We do not accept nor allow negative exponents. How do we change negative exponents?
Move it to the top.
Whatever part of the fractions it's on, you move it from top to bottom or bottom to top or however, and that just makes the fraction positive. So if this was a -3 on the bottom, I move it to the top and it just becomes a +3. It does not change the letter. It's still the same letter. It doesn't make the letter negative. It only changes the exponent. So tomorrow, if they gave you this, x to the -5, and they ask you to make it, to simplify it, this starts out on the top. To make it a positive, you'd have to move it now to the bottom if you want over x to the 5th. That would be the acceptable form. If it's on bottom, you move it to top. If it's on top, you move it to bottom. Did this last almost 50 minutes?
Yeah.
What are you doing that now for?
Oh, yeah, I got it.
13 is the counting the right.
It's what?
Yeah, 13 is counting them.
What's 13?
Maureen, and you said it was not, you didn't care.
Well-
13 and 14, you said you didn't care.
teach us that.
Yes, he did. He skimmed, it was, he skimmed it.
It's always the teacher's fault, remember that.
Yeah.
Can't figure out. I'm stopping this unless somebody does.
No, we're good. No, I'm running. Go ahead, I'll not do it, stop it.
Sit down.